And we are live in the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner. Joining me, as has been the case for the majority of the last 2 months, Josh Hayes, Steve Bowyer, and Rick Partlow, our illustrious panel of
Somebody defibrillate
stirrers.
Josh.
I don't know if
Oh, it's
Josh is
weird. I must have had a bad connection or something. It's weird.
For most of your life, yeah.
Yeah.
for most of your life. Last week we talked about publishing in 2023 and kind of what the landscape was like these days, and we had a very spirited conversation where lots of things got
It's a
dragged out and
boiling
discussed.
hellscape.
Yeah. And we kind of had to end the conversation that we were kind of in the middle of, and I said, you know what, let's just kind of pick up the thread and keep talking slash hashing out some of these issues that we're presented with in the modern era, you know, a decade or a little longer after the Kindle revolution, the thing that brought a lot of writers into the fold and a lot of books into the fold and into competition. And you know, the landscape is very different now. Right before we went live, we were having a conversation about awards and the way a lot of uh, some of these standard things that have uh, you know have become part of the publishing landscape and some of the changing ideas behind them. So I thought, why don't we talk about it? There was a time several years ago where if you could get nominated for an award, it was a huge boost to your career, to bring more eyes to your writing. You know, you got to put a blurb on your front cover, you know, Dragon Award nominated, or you know, whatever the award was. And I think that I was hearing from you guys that some of those feelings kind of soured. That the award landscape is not what it once was. So to begin, do those things matter nowadays? Has the competition gotten um, so steep that those little things that used to bring attention just don't anymore, or do
Well,
people
not
not
just
take
that
them
not just that the
seriously?
competition is steep. It's also that the the big money behind the big trad publishers has gotten thrown into campaigning for their people. I mean, it used to be that the Dragon Awards, they're still voted on by the fans, but it used to be nobody actually campaigned for the Dragon Awards, and it wasn't something that the trad publishers were interested in. And then they got interested in it, and all of a sudden, well, yeah, they win every award because they put the money into the ads and the campaigning, and that's it. You know,
Well, I think more than that, there's a um there, like you mentioned, there's a kind of perceived prestige on getting nominated or even winning an award. But having been nominated, I was nominated, I think, in 2020 for Valor. I can tell you that I saw no increase in sales after getting nominated. And also, when you look at not just the Dragons, but like, let's just like the New York Times bestseller, right? Like, there's you get that and you want to put it on the book, and that's great. But even that list is not an accurate representation of sales because it's curated, and it's been proven that it's curated. Um,
and
and it
USA Today used to be an accurate representation of sales, but then they got rid of it.
Right. And so, like, you look at books that I think it was either, was it Rothman or was it Anderson that posted the actual sales numbers of like the top 5 on the New York Times, and on the list the number 3 book actually had the most sales, and I can't remember where number 1 was at. So uh, in summary, for my bid on this, awards are fun, they're great, it's cool to have dragon nominated on your title, your byline on the cover. It's cool to be a New York Times bestseller, but does that help you in sales? Probably not.
It used to be a thing back when being like Hugo Award winning, or
right.
Yeah.
or
Well,
Nebula
and they
Award
don't
winning.
take into account ebooks, right? Or Kindle page reads, right? So
Well, that
you
was
could
New
be
York
getting,
Times, but I'm talking about awards,
yeah,
not like the bestsellers, but it used to be having a Hugo Award winning science fiction novel or a Nebula Award winning science fiction novel that meant something.
right.
But that all changed too. Nowadays, that would mean that that was a very successful novel that people would read that. Nowadays, it means nothing. It means
Well, and you
nothing to
look at
sales.
the most recent. I know Steve can speak to this. I don't know if he actually wants to, but the most recent Audio Awards, the book that won for science fiction and fantasy, when you look it up on Amazon, had like 9 reviews when it won, compared to a couple of other books that had hundreds or thousands of reviews. And you look at that award and go, is that award based on merit, or is it based on just the people that are running the award? They want to give it to somebody, right? So I don't know. Awards are good. They're fun if they're done correctly, but I think too many authors get caught up in, if I get nominated or I get this award, that's really going to help me as an author from just a financial standpoint, and it just doesn't.
Steve has said nothing.
You're on mute, Steve. You're on mute.
Conspicuously quiet.
You're muted. You're muted.
I'm having a rare moment of
Humility.
filter. Humility could be a word, but I'm having a rare filter moment where I'm really trying to be careful what I say, because I have strong opinions on all of this based on fact, but we live in an age that no one cares about fact. And so anything that I say might be held against me in the court of law. If we wanted to start with letters and move to awards, like Josh was saying some things, I can promise you He Who Fights with Monsters has sold more than any book on the New York Times bestsellers list.
100%.
It's not even I'm not even guessing. I know it has. But they're not taking page reads into account. They're not taking digital only books into account. They're ignoring. Yeah, go ahead, Hank.
No, I was just going to say the page reads thing, because we do draw comparisons between the music industry and the publishing industry a lot, because there are a lot of similarities there. And we know that the ranking system in the music industry has changed in the last 5 years, maybe more specifically to include streams of songs. As you know, it used to be if an album went platinum, that meant you sold 1 million copies. Well, nobody buys CDs, anymore. So you have to throw that out the window. So now it's a collection of how many streams you have, which is kind of equivalent to KU page reads. I think there's a similarity that can be drawn there. So if we see one industry is kind of embracing the tracking of the technology, will the book industry follow suit? Anyway, I didn't mean
The
to.
industry is attempting to follow suit. Orbit's starting something called Orbit Works, which let me just tell you from our perspective, having I can't say that. Their contract's not very nice to authors. And when you're in a landscape where we have people like Athon, Mountain Valley, Portal Books, Orbit's going after Lit RPG, and not only they're going after Lit RPG, they're going after authors who are already signed to publishers, asking for the book rights to books signed by publishers, because they're that ignorant of the landscape. They don't realize that they're asking my authors, the largest publisher of Lit RPG in the world, they're asking my authors if they could republish their self-published book that we published. This is how tone deaf and lost the traditional publishing world is when it comes to anything related to indie publishing. They were just going through the top sellers and emailing them, not even smart enough to look at the publishers and see Athon Books and go, what the fuck is Athon Books? Sorry. What the hell is Athon Books? What the heck is Athon Books? What am I allowed to say on this show?
What the fuck am I allowed to say?
They don't even
Family
look.
friendly.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I get really passionate about this moment. Mom, if you're watching, I'm so sorry. They don't look at this to go, well, what is that? And if they just did a modicum of research, they would find that Athon Books is the top name. They even, when trying to find lit RPG books on Twitter, they said, we're looking for books like He Who Fights with Monsters and Domestication. And I responded, oh, those are not self-published like you just claimed they were. Hi, we published them. And then there was sort of an apology on their side. But I'm painting a picture of just, yeah, TradPub's going to try to go that way. Wrong. They're going to give 20% 20% royalties. They're going to give 0 advances, and they're going to expect to get audio rights, and they're going to do all these things that none of these people are going to do. They're used to high percentages and hundreds of thousands of dollars in advances for books, not, but we're Orbit. Or but we're Simon & Schuster. Simon & Schuster 451 failed miserably. That was their attempt at digital only. Random House Hydra failed miserably because they don't understand the landscape. They think they could sell $14.99 ebooks in a world where $2.99 ebooks are king. Right? So, like, are they going to go that way? Maybe. But let's go back to the letters for a second. USA Today used to mean something. They don't exist anymore. But what happened is a bunch of very subpar authors put together box sets of 20 books and stole letters from the USA Today, and then put it on the titles of their books. And then people bought these subpar authors and discovered that this is not a USA Today quality book. And so the USA Today letters lost their purpose and meaning.
And 6-7 years ago, that was a thing. You would be on Facebook and they would actively be recruiting authors for their box set.
And you didn't
we're
make
going to
money.
make
You
a
didn't make money at
charge
that.
for the USA.
You didn't make money at that. They would have 20 books for 99 cents.
Exactly.
And you would have to spend thousands of your own dollars.
Right.
And they were
promote those
full
books.
novels that were put into these collections. Like,
And
not
for
just
this-
shorts.
For the sake of loving people, like, some of those books weren't subpar, but let's call 2 out of 18 not USA Today quality books, right? So when I think that's one of the reasons they folded, is because they recognized that this landscape no longer works for non-curated lists. The best sellers are not going to be the ones that they want to put their stamp of approval on. And so they did away with that. New York Times, totally inaccurate. Doesn't even matter. It's a worthless thing that readers don't even care about anymore because we've ruined it.
Well, the problem is with anything, you've got people that are going to try to game the system. It happens with whatever great tool comes along. People are going to use that to try to, be a flash in the pan and, make some valiant run at whatever it is, and then ruin it for everybody else.
I was just going to say that there's when we're talking about kind of, publishing your book, right? There are so many people out there that are looking at the system going, how can I trick it? How can I game it? How can I do something to completely obliterate whatever it is, right? And I think that's so disheartening in the indie community, because they're not trying to succeed on the merit of their work. They're trying to succeed by tricking the system to appear to be better.
And there would, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. I was like, there's a difference between, like, for instance, authors that get into AMG, and
ESP,
and they're
What's
putting
AMG?
a whole. It's a Amazon. It's basically a partnership with Amazon Publishing for advertising. But you have to let's just say you've got to commit $30,000 of your own money.
Oh
to
yeah,
this.
I've heard of that. I didn't recognize the name.
And then Amazon puts in some of their money, and it runs a campaign for your book. That is not to say that they're gaming the system, but they are spending a lot of money to look better, but they might not be making 30 grand back. They might be they spend 30 grand and earn 10. Is that worth it? I don't know, but that in my mind isn't gaming the system. That's advertising. That's
and
doing what you can do.
Let's be clear. A lot of this gaming the system came about because of the inequities in the publishing world, where indie
For
authors
sure.
were just trying to get an equal footing with the trad pub guys. And part of the way you did that is you figured out a way to get these letters that would have readers take you as seriously as some of these other guys that just seemed to be on an unequal playing field. And it was, I can see that the roots of this were, we just want to be taken as seriously as you. We can produce the same quality product. We're just not given the opportunity to get in front of readers like you do. And this is a way that we can, get some credibility in the space. And,
Well,
like we
I've said
say,
it
people
before
ruin
that
everything.
Athon books exist because not every author wants to be an authorpreneur, nor do they have the skill to be an authorpreneur.
Oh, definitely the skill. Most of us don't.
So if you're
Or
one
the
of those
desire.
folks that maybe you write really well, but you have no idea how to sell books, I just had a very long conversation with somebody, so I'm going to truncate some of this to just say that you've got a split in what sells a book. Whether your book is good or not is maybe 30 to 35% of whether a book sells. The other 30 to 35% of it is marketing and visibility. And then the other 30 to 35% is genuine Amazon luck.
Yep.
Right? Algorithms. Now, marketing and visibility go hand in hand with algorithms, because if you properly market, you can hit the algorithms. And so those two things do go in tandem, but then you could release a book randomly and hit algorithm, and luck can carry you the rest of the 70% of the way. A good book can rarely carry you from your 30% to 100%. Why? Because visibility is important. Amazon's way of pushing things. And I know that we often talk about Amazon. Athon is Amazon exclusive. I have great reasons for being Amazon exclusive because I've seen the other side of things. And in our genres, there is no other side of things. There's Amazon or don't write books. So awards, I know we kind of got off that. Awards are another thing altogether. I will keep my comments about the Audis to myself. I was very honored to be nominated. I was very confused when the night was over. Because we were up against Neil Gaiman, and Neil Gaiman should have won, period. Mm-hmm. Travis Baldree should have won. Wesley Chu should have won. We shouldn't have won, and I don't even know what the book that won was. And you could make the argument, well, maybe it was just that good a book that it didn't matter that it only had 8 ratings. That's fine. Make that argument. I'm not going to speak on the rest of it, but this isn't bitter Steve didn't win. Steve went there with 0 intention of walking away with an award. I knew who I was up against.
Yeah. I think to take this conversation in kind of a different direction, for and maybe we can kind of timestamp this, but I think maybe talking about the pros and cons, or maybe the different avenues that you can take a book, especially as a new author. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit, and
and
just give some fundamental.
Yeah, and my whole thoughts about the award process that we were talking about a minute ago was just to highlight this thing used to be something that really mattered, and something that authors would chase. The letters on the cover used to be something that really mattered, and authors would chase. Those days are essentially over. So
sure.
What are the things that are working for authors, and what do you guys kind of see as trends that might help authors cut through the noise these days?
Let me just real quick, as we're talking about awards, we'll get over it, right? This award meant nothing. in terms of sales, in terms of whatever. As a matter of fact, there are so many categories for the Bebo Awards that I feel like anyone who submits is going to win an award.
What's
However,
the Bebo Awards?
Best Indie Book Award, right? But let me just say something. This is really cool to have on my shelf.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to discount like the people's desire to have some kind of trophy, some kind of ribbon, some kind of thing that validates something. And quite frankly, I like looking at this. It's really kind of a cool little crystal thing that exists. So don't think that if you're chasing some sort of an award, it's a bad thing, but don't expect it to make you money. That's
Right.
what we're going for here.
Right.
Yes.
Awards as validation versus awards as a way to further your writing career, I guess
For sure.
is really kind of what we're talking about.
I guess it depends on what you feel validates your career. I mean, I would love to have an award, but I wouldn't love it enough to make it the focus of my writing, or my sole aim. Like, I'm going to take 2 years and write a book so good and make the friends and schmooze and network to the point where I think it'll win an award. That's that's not going to pay the mortgage. It's So I mean, if you're in this just for recognition, then yeah, awards are important. Maybe those letters are important, but for me, I mean, this is a job. So
I'm in this industry to help people pay their mortgages. I'm not here to have I mean, we have shirts that say that, best damn sci-fi in the world or something like that. But like, and I do believe that that's true.
Darn sci-fi. This is a family show.
Yeah, that's darn sci-fi. I do believe that that's true. I believe we have some of the best fiction and fantasy out there. However, there is a fine line between good enough and great.
Yeah.
And when you are writing to sustain a career and to pay a mortgage and to support your family and to send your daughter to college and all of these things, sometimes good enough has to be good enough so that you can get to your next good enough book.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, good enough still means very good, readable 4 to 5 star book. I'm not talking about give me crap, give me trash. This isn't write as fast as you can, lowest viable product. It's just, if you toil over a book for 2 years, as Rick is saying, just to win an award or just so you could say you have the best book, we live in a time when, like 10 years from now, it doesn't matter how good your book sold, probably won't be remembered because there's so many books, there's so much content, there's binging of everything. So we're giving somebody entertainment for a moment and hoping that they come back for the next moment of entertainment. You do have TV shows that are not looking for Oscars.
Right.
Let me say something here that I'm not going to mention names because I'm not calling anybody out. But I heard a traditionally published author say yesterday or recently that he was talking to somebody at an awards event, and they were like, "Oh, I know I'm going to lose," and that person was indie, and he asked them how long it took them to write the book that they had nominated, and they said 2 months. He said, I spent 8 months on mine, so just the sheer amount of time you had, means it's going to be a better book. That's not true. I know it's definitively not true. I have read books that have been written over years of time and books that have been written over 2 or 3 months. There is no qualitative difference between them. Those extra months did nothing except maybe add 1 or 2 phrases here or there that somebody suggested, or maybe move something around. And as authors and definitely as editors, we see that as so much more important than the reader actually sees it. The reader wants a good story. So all this, stuff about taking 2 years to write a book or 10 years to write a book and perfecting it, it's not going to make a difference to the reader. They want a good story with characters that engage them.
So what happens if you spend 10 years on it and it doesn't sell?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's the other thing. This person is privileged in that they are one of the few traditionally published authors who makes good money. There's not that many in genre fiction that make good money from this. And most of us, if we tried to go that route, would get one book if we were like extremely lucky, and that would be it, and we'd make no money. Go ahead. Sorry, Steve.
I was just going to say that we've talked about Stephen King on this show quite a lot, and we've brought up On Writing quite a lot. In On Writing, Stephen King says if it takes you more than 90 days to write a book, you shouldn't be writing a book.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Stephen King,
and that's first draft.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, and there's an argument to be made that a fast first draft is a more coherent, cohesive book than a first draft that takes you 2 years to write, because you, as a person, are a different person over that 2 years, and the story that comes out of you is going to be very different.
For sure.
You wind up with books that just feel disjointed and like, well, this guy was in 8 different places in his life when he was writing this.
Well, I've written books in 3 weeks and I've written books in 10 months, right? Like the difference in those two things. The Raptors books that I write with Chris Vallon, we write those so quick. They're all in first person. They're all told as a story. I could blow through 20,000 words in a few days and then go back and read them and go, oh, those are pretty good 20,000 word books because they're easier to write. And so am I supposed to just labor over it longer because somebody tells me it should take a long time to write a book, or should I go, that's all it took to write the book? I'm sorry that you have trouble writing, so it took you a year to write this book. I didn't have any trouble writing.
I think too that when you look at like, what is your intention? Do you want an award, or do you want to make money, or do you want to be traditionally published or self-published or whatever? You have to really look at your intention. And honestly, if your intention is to make money, do something else. Don't write books, because it is possible to make a lot of money. Rick makes a lot of money. Jamie makes a lot of money. I make a modicum income from my books.
Jamie makes a lot of money. Steve doesn't make anything.
Yeah, Steve makes nothing.
I would argue that Steve makes way more than all of us.
That's true.
But that has nothing to do with his writing.
Yeah. But you look at your intention as an author, and I think especially nowadays where there is so much, if you want to call it gaming, so much tactics that you can use to sell books that authors are, decide before ahead of time what you want to do with your author, your writing, right? Like, and again, if it takes you a year to write a book, that's okay. If it takes you 6 months or 2 weeks to write a book, that's okay. But then look at what you want to do. Like, as a hybrid indie author, you can realistically look at making, let's just throw a number, $20,000-$30,000 a year if you can get books out and publish and they sell well. A lot of authors don't make that. They make $10,000 a year, right? But that's great. Like, you have like, how many people have a hobby that spend $10,000 a year for their hobby? And you can do this. All you need is a computer, and you sit down and you write, and you can make 10 grand or 5 grand or whatever it is. I think that in and of itself is being successful. And like we mentioned on writing, Stephen King says, if you can pay your phone bill, you're a professional author. And I think going into it with the mindset of trying to be a author that makes $1 million a year, right? I'm being hyperbolic. Hyperbolic.
There you
but
go.
Looking at it like that is wrong. It's not the right way to look at it, right? Go into your book writing the book that you want to write.
I mean, there's a wrong way to look at it, as long as you're prepared to accept that you're not going to not going to get that. I mean, if you want to say that's going to be my mountain, that I'm going to make $1 million, well, more power to you. As long as you don't get devastated when you don't make $1 million.
Well, I think
if you're willing to stop on the shack about 100 yards up and make home there.
Brandon Sanderson told me on my other podcast I used to do that he said, what is with this mindset that everyone who opens their word processor needs to be a New York Times bestselling author?
Yeah.
He said, no other hobby in the world do we treat
people
like that. If you've got a friend who likes to go play basketball at the Y, a couple of nights a week. We don't hound him about when he's going to join the NBA.
100%.
Because the NBA doesn't have an Amazon. This is the key, right? Like Amazon created an opportunity for Joe Schmo to be a writer professionally. And so because of that, writers go, oh, I see a lot of people making money, and they don't see all the people failing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's why they failed. Nobody sees them.
Yeah, which is true, right?
True. Yeah.
With writing, I think oftentimes, and I've learned this through Athon, I have expectations for authors that authors don't have for authors. I have a trad pub friend who just told me the other day he got a royalty check for $44 for a quarter. Right? He's actually a moderately successful author. Moderately.
That just horrified Josh so much that his camera quit working.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But then I also saw somebody post, I sold 241 books this week on launch week, and they were so ecstatic about those 241 books. When we sell 241 books and that's all, we go, that was a failure.
Mm-hmm.
But the author is so thrilled about that number. They don't care about the money. They care that they sold 241 books, and 241 books have the potential of reading their book. And so I think even like Rhett and I, sometimes with Athon, we think authors want something that we want when they actually might be totally satisfied with, oh my God, Athon published our book and I sold a total of, X number of copies.
Steve, just for the record, I do want what you want.
I know. I do. But not all do, because there's a lot of people that are working as an engineer and they've got a great part-time or a great full-time job, and this is a hobby.
Yeah. That's how it started out for me as a hobby, and I was when I put up my first books on Amazon and a bunch of people read it, I'm like, holy shit. I didn't care that there was 99 cents and I was making 33 cents a shot. And,
for sure.
And I made I did make $10,000 that first year. And that was like, holy crap, that's awesome. I could buy like a lens or something, like do photography, with that money. I wasn't thinking,
I've seen some of your lenses. You could buy half a lens.
No, they're not that expensive.
I think talking about intention, you look at how are you going to do it? And I think maybe talking about the differences in indie and traditional, it's pretty basic, but a lot of people don't understand. Like if you go traditional, there's a lot of downtime, so to speak.
Downtime, and when
couple of years of downtime.
When Orbit was looking for lit RPG authors on Twitter, several of the lit RPG authors commented on there, people that we know and people that, were just as skeptical and frustrated that they didn't know what they were talking about. And they said, well, here's your problem, is that you require agents and agents laugh at us.
Yep.
So cool. You have one gatekeeper, that is Orbit, asking for stuff, and then you have another gatekeeper, which is the agents who don't understand this genre at all, because they use things like Bookstat and book reports or whatever, and all those do is tell you physical sales, and they don't realize, oh my God, Matt Dinneman made more money than anyone at this convention, and he was told that he's not allowed to park in the author parking spaces.
Well, and it's interesting.
Under no circumstances are you allowed to park in the author parking spaces. Matt Dinneman, one of the largest authors on the planet.
It's interesting when you talk about I think from a book selling publishing realm, if anybody's trying to get in, I think not based on my success, just based on what I see in the space, going with a successful hybrid publisher is probably more advantageous to the author than trying to go the publishing route if you're just looking to make some money. And I say that because you look at what's happening with the Writers Guild right now in Hollywood. The technology is changing so fast that traditional publishing, how much money are they missing out by not being in KU? Millions of dollars, right? And you look at what's happening with the Writers Guild, where they used to get paid when they re-aired episodes, they would get a residual from the re-air. But on the streaming service, it's not a re-air. so they're not getting residuals from the shows that are going on Netflix, and so they're not getting paid. And that is a problem with established traditional publishing, and even in Hollywood, where they're not looking at the technology that's available, and they're just kind of looking for loopholes not to pay authors
Yeah,
and
that's the thing
writers.
that
And
they want to treat their writers on the Screen Actors Guild as like contractors,
for sure.
and pay them once and then it's mine, and you can go to hell.
Well, and you look at the royalties in traditional publishing versus indie publishing. Not every indie hybrid publisher gets like a 50-50 split, which is, if you're moderately successful, that's usually the norm. But some get less than that. Some get 30%, some get 25% or whatever. But even at 25%, you're still making a better royalty than you would get through traditional publishing, because traditional publishing does like 5-8%, 15% or something like that. And when you're
Not
not,
returns.
and right, and so, and you're also, you've got to earn back the advance or whatever that they pay you. And so if you're just looking to sell some books and have a good time and write a good book, traditional publishing really isn't a great way to go. It's just not.
Let me also say that 90% of people listening to this would be better off sub-pubbing than anything else. Because, for instance, Athon, yeah, we publish a lot of science fiction and fantasy, but my slush pile, we reject thousands of submissions a month, thousands. So where is there left? I could probably count on one hand how many sort of indie publishers there are out there that are helping to make authors a living. And all of those are getting all of the submissions, and chances are you're going to get ignored. Listen, when we first started Athon, I personally responded to every submission. I can't do that anymore. If we wanted to close our submissions, that'd be a different story, but we don't want to do that because we want to give people an opportunity. But I can't respond to everybody. My team can't respond to everyone. We don't have time for thousands of submissions a month. And so when you submit to a place like Athon or I don't know, Mountaindale or any of these places, and just expect that you're never going to hear back unless we like your book, because that's just unfortunately the way it goes. And so self-pub is really the strongest option for most people out there. But go into it knowing that you're up against about 20,000 books a week.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have something set aside, I would encourage everybody, if you're writing a book, save $500 during the time that you're writing a book. And I know how difficult that is for a lot of people, but like when you want something, go get it. Go get a part-time job for 4 weeks and just save everything that you make during that time and take $500 and put it toward your initial advertising. It doesn't sound like a lot of money to a lot of people. It's a huge number to another group of people, but $500 is a sufficient number for a self-published author to put into advertising. And do some research. Rick brought it up last time that like people who write books on how to sell books but have never sold their books are not somebody that you should be listening to.
For sure. And there's a lot of research out. There's a lot of resources out there that are free, especially on YouTube with podcasts. I know, like we have at Keystroke Media, my podcast. We're very sporadic on our shows right now, but we have 8 years of content that is up there that we cover everything that you could possibly think of when it comes to publishing, from story to craft to business into all of that stuff. And some of it is old, some of it is outdated, but the majority of it stands now. And we cover a lot of the pitfalls that you can fall into as an author. And definitely as a new author, if you see anything that says pay us and we will make you a bestseller, avoid that.
Don't pay a publisher either. If a publisher's not paying you, it's not a publisher.
100%. As a new author, if you don't want to self-pub, you don't want to deal with the business end of it, you just want to write books, that's great. Find an indie publisher and look at their books. Go and look at how they sell. Look at what they're publishing. If you have a romance book, don't submit it to Athon. We can't sell romance, right? We sell sci-fi, lit RPG, mill sci-fi. Look at your genre. It's kind of like back in the day when you would buy the Writer's Digest, the big honking book, and then flip through and see who's buying what. You can do that now on Amazon. If you've got a book that is a mill sci-fi book, go on Amazon, look at the top 20, top 50 military sci-fi books, look at the publisher, and then reach out and see what most publishers will have what they pay, or what their royalties, what their submission guidelines are. Do that little bit of research, and then, you can reach out to authors and talk to authors. They might not answer your questions, but like if somebody reached out and say, hey, what are your feelings on Mountaindale or Athon or this publisher or
I get
whatever?
people doing that all the time.
Yeah, and
About Athon.
it's mind-blowing to me that people don't look at that after spending so much time writing a book. They don't take any time to look at what is the best way to go publish this.
Let me bring some levity to this. I get texts, and Rhett get texts all the time. Hey, what's it like working with Athon Books?
Yeah.
Because I'm Jamie Castle, and they don't even do the research to look at the About Us section to see that I'm both Steve and Jamie. And Rhett's even more glaring. He's just Rhett, and he's at the top of our About Us page, and he gets text, hey, I'm thinking about going to work with Athon Books. What's your experience? And Rhett's like, you're talking to me right now in email. Like at Athon Books. Like I owned this company.
If Rhett wanted to be smart, he said, well, it's a great company, but the owner's just a huge butthole.
Do research so you don't look dumb. We get all these submissions that are clearly mass subbed. I don't know another way of wording that. I know there's a phrase, but like
simultaneous
pub. Thank you. Sub. And we'll get messages that are like, I love everything that you guys have written. And then they include a book that was clearly from Portal Books. They forgot to change one part of their message. Like, y'all be smart.
Right.
Be smart here. We're not dumb. We know. And honestly, when we see something that you didn't even take the time to make sure you got it right, like delete. We're delete. I don't care if it's the best book ever. We're deleting it. You didn't do your homework. You looked like a dummy, and you made us feel stupid.
Well, I think a lot of people get into the race of doing it as fast as they can. And, I think that after, like I already said, after spending so much time working on your book, you've edited it, you've hopefully had some people read it. If you're a first-time author, maybe you get some people to read it. You have to pay an editor to edit it if you're going to go that route. And then you just quickly fire off an email. You don't look at what's in your email. You don't even look at who you're submitting to. You're just kind of, well, I don't want to say what I was going to say, but it's so easy now to find the information that you need on the internet. Like, it's just so easy. And for people that don't take the time to do that, it's disheartening, because I see, you see posts on Facebook in these writers groups about, oh, I saw this thing. What do you guys think about that? And everybody's like, don't pay for your book to get published, but I've been in this publishing industry for 12 years now, and it's hard for me to remember how I felt as a brand new author going into the industry and not knowing anything about it, and just putting a book on Amazon and not knowing what I'm doing and all of that stuff. And there's so many people now that are in my position that I was 12 years ago. Right.
Yeah, it's so much better now than it was then, though, because when I published my first stuff in 2011, I don't think there was barely any YouTube channels.
Right.
There wasn't really a community. There was a few message forums.
Yeah.
Like Kindle, the Kindle message forum that the Anderley came off of, But I was totally in the dark.
Keyboards.
Keyboards, yeah. I had no idea what I was doing, and I put my first books up there with like square pictures that I homemade that weren't even the shape
Right.
of a book cover. It's so much easier now. And this is, as far as the ease of doing it, the best time to publish a book. On the
sure.
other hand, if you want to make money at a book, this is the worst time to ever publish a book because there are millions and millions of other books coming out every year on Amazon.
Rick, that sparks a really, don't rush this.
100%.
Authors, don't rush this. Don't expect that the day you finish writing the book is the day you have to publish the book. Like, we get authors that sometimes get frustrated because they might have to wait 6 months for us to publish their book. I need money now. That's not my problem.
Right.
You
It's
want to
not
make
the business to be in if you want to make money fast.
every time an author has forced us to publish early through complaining, right? Like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, whatever that, sometimes we just go, fine. If you want to ruin your chances at success, we're going to throw it out there and we'll just see what happens. But if you want to have real opportunity, let us put it out in 6 months so we can do this properly. And every time they're just like, well, I need money now. I'm like, okay, do you want little money now or chance of a lot more money later?
For sure.
Go get a part-time job for a little while. Like, that's the answer here. And I find that authors don't want to do, quote, real work. They're so desperate to sit behind a computer and type away that they trick themselves into believing like, well, this is my calling. This is what I was made to do. Cool. Go get another job to support your calling.
Well, and I think metering expectations is probably, like we've talked about it before, but like Rick just said, it's the best time and the worst time to publish a book right now. But I think if you're passionate about it, 100%, I would never tell anybody if you're passionate about something not to do it, but just meter your expectations.
Like, am I negative when I say stuff like that?
No. And that's what I mean is like, it's realistic, it's reasonable. And for new authors coming into it thinking I'm going to be the next Brandon Sanderson or Martin or David Weber or Mark Greaney or whatever, that doesn't happen even in traditional.
I thought you were going to keep going. I thought you were just going to name every author there ever was.
I could. I could. But that's the thing. Like we've said already, there's so much of a rush to get your book out because it's going to be the next bestseller, and it just doesn't work that way. And to be honest, most books are not that good.
Rick, how many people have you met in real life who went, "Oh, you're Rick Partlow"?
You mean outside of like conventions? No.
Outside of author.
None.
I've had one person.
Jeff ran into somebody who knew me in a Walmart. But
I get that sometimes, right? Like if I mention somebody, oh yeah, I read his book. I've got a guy at our church that's read like everyone, and he didn't even know who Athon was, and he found out who I was, and he's like, I know Rick Partlow, I know this guy, I know that guy. I've met one person who came up to me on the street and went, Jamie Castle? One person ever. The reason I bring that up is because like somebody would recognize J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, yada yada. They're not knowing J.K. Rowling.
The only time I've ever been recognized as being in the author community, I was wearing my Athon Books Jack Daniels shirt. And I'm
not allowed to have those. Don't tell Jack
Daniels sorry.
Their logo.
The Athon shirt. And I went into a gas station, and the cashier looked at my shirt and goes, I've read some books from Athon. But he didn't know who I was, right? And I go, yeah, I work for them. And he goes, oh, really? I just read this book. And I'm like, well, I formatted that 2 weeks ago. Whatever it was, right? I've never been recognized for being an author. And I honestly, there are people
that much superior privilege of being recognized for working for Athon.
Right. But I mean, let's be honest. How many authors that are big names would get noticed by people that don't read books?
Yeah.
Right? It's not like you're Chris Pratt walking down the street and everybody knows who Chris Pratt is. Like Brandon Sanderson could walk down the street and no one would know who he is if they didn't read his books, right?
And even then, they might not recognize him. But I
Yeah.
think more my point was just that, like, we don't live in the age of notoriety with books, and
For
so
sure.
we need to temper those expectations. And I love what Hank said earlier about this being a hobby.
Yes.
It's a hobby until it's not a hobby,
Right.
and you need to
100%.
kind of continue with the attitude that it's a hobby.
Well, and I want to piggyback on what you said a minute ago, Steve. You know, for most people, the vast majority of people, the day job is your best friend.
100%.
Yeah. Take a look at. I mean, kind of an extreme example would be the Apostle Paul, who
I was
wrote
gonna bring him up.
2/3 of the New Testament of the Bible, and he made tents. You
Right.
know,
Right.
are you in? Do you occupy more rarefied air than he did?
Right.
I think that's the best place to be in, because then you're not. I mean, if you're making $1 million on your books or $100,000 on your books, you're in a fantastic spot. But if you're not making that money, the best place to be in is to have a job that can sustain your living and your lifestyle, and still have time to write books and have fun with it and make some money on the side. Then you're not pressured into, oh my God, if this book doesn't sell, I'm not going to eat next week. Right? You can write the books, even if you write fast and you want to write book fast. That's great. You can still do that. But I think that it's happened more now with the indie revolution, but the term full-time author has now become like a meme, where if you're not a full-time author, you're not really successful and you shouldn't be given any credibility. And really, how many traditional authors over the last 100 years have been 100% full-time? Probably
up
very
until
little. And
up until the last 30 or 40, I think that it was the norm
oh yeah,
for most successful authors to be something else.
100%.
College
To this
professors.
day, I get emails from publicists that work for the big five publishers that are looking to plug one of their new release authors, you know, to have a spot on a podcast or something. And then we will work out a time to record for them. And invariably, 60% or more of them are like, well, I have to work this day, or can we do it after I, you know, get off work from here? Or I have a spouse who is working and allows me to be home, but I have to work around my kids. And this idea that, you know, that you become an author and you know, reside in the ivory tower is
Right.
it's,
Well,
it's
I'd love
just
if
not
we
real.
had a.
It's just
I'd
not
love
real.
if we had a better. I don't want to say better because I don't mean to say that this isn't good, but like, I wish the comment system. I wish we could actually talk to some of the folks that are listening to this to know if we're on point with where they're at. I know we have the Circles app, and you know, I'd love to. That's what it's called, right? Circles, the cafe app.
Oh, yeah, circle. Yeah.
You know, but sometimes you do these hour-long podcasts where you're harping on an issue or you're hitting on an issue, and it's not always evident if the folks that are listening what boat they're in. So, like, if you guys have an opportunity, those of you who are listening, to maybe email Hank or outreach somehow to the Dabble community and let us know, like, where are you at? This is we listen every week, and you guys talk about this, and this, and that really pertains to my particular spot in the author community. But like, when you go off into this tangent, we're lost. We don't know, honestly. I think we're in a different position sometimes than new authors. We don't know. Josh said it, like, we don't remember necessarily where we're at. Facebook timeline memories is my best friend because I get to see where I was at the early parts of my career. And I was stoked when my first book came out and reached X rank. And now I look at that and go, that's not a good rank.
Mm-hmm.
But I see people on Facebook that they hit 23,000 rank and they're thrilled.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like maybe we're in a bubble here where we hear this more, but I feel like more people would be happier if they treated writing as a passion rather than a career, especially until they hit some, like for instance, I was talking about with Hank, I do wildlife photography. When I first started it, I had ideas that I might make money at that, you know, but that quickly faded away. And when I found out that I couldn't make money at it, I might have just given it up, but I really enjoy doing it. So I do it because I love doing it. And it doesn't matter if my images win awards or make money. It's because it's something I love to do. And trying to do it as a business, I think would make it more tedious for me. And I think a lot of, especially new writers who get into this, they would be much better off just thinking of this as a passion, something that if anybody reads my book besides me, that's a win.
For sure.
And if I make a little bit of money, that is just a huge deal. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I can't quit my job because this is something I just love to do. Not most people, the vast majority of people don't get to quit their job and pursue their hobby. Like people, not to go too far attention, but wildlife photography, people who make a living at wildlife photography, they don't make a living by selling images in a gallery. They make a living by giving tours, by giving lessons, by
Right.
Patreon, that type of thing. That's the kind of thing that
is a day job.
That's the kind of thing that a lot of people, not everybody obviously, but a lot of people in the writing industry make their living by teaching lessons, by editing, by Patreon, Kickstarter. They do it by doing other things than writing, and it takes a lot of work.
For sure.
The people that can make a living just writing and not doing any of that stuff are not very common, and you are probably not going to be one of those people.
At least not right away.
And not right away. And there's a tiny percentage of people that can do it.
Yeah.
And you have to accept the odds that you may not be one of those tiny percentage that can make a living just by writing. So if you want to make a living in the writing industry, you may have to do all this other crap that you don't want to do. So maybe you should consider writing as your passion and do it out of love. And any money that comes in is just gravy, and not stress out and not get down on yourself about the fact you aren't a full-time writer who can pay all your bills through writing.
I think that's a marvelous attitude to have, Rick. When we put too much stress on the money making of it, a lot of times we forget why we were passionate about it in the first place.
Yeah.
Get back
because then you publish
love.
a book and it doesn't sell, and you're like, oh, I'm never gonna write again. But if writing is what you want to do, and it's what gives you joy, then it doesn't matter whether you sell 2 copies or 2,000 copies or 2 million copies.
And remember that writing and publishing are a lot of times two very different things, and don't have to. One doesn't necessarily judge the success of the other.
For sure.
Yeah.
And plus, being an artist means, and being a writer is kind of being an artist, it means that if somebody doesn't like the thing you just did, you can always make another one.
Right.
Just consider it a lesson till next time. If you feel like you failed because your book didn't sell or people didn't like it, well, you can write another one. Nobody says that was the last book you ever have to write.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
God, you could write the same one. Right. If no one liked it in the first place, you're not just friggin' fix it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. True. Well, that's our time for today. We're going to take the next couple of weeks off as we regroup and see what adventure awaits us. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned. Go to storycraft.cafe and there'll be news about what's coming up next. Rick, Steve, Josh, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.